Okay, car vlog. I already did a practice 20-minute one on Friday evening, but I did like some nervous tick in the middle of it and it bugged me. I even posted it to Facebook for, I don't know, a few minutes or hours, and it took a few minutes. It took quite a while to post that much. So I wanted to address a lecture that I heard on Kierkegaard's Existential Dialectic. And so he posits that there are three lifestyles that we can choose from. The first being the aesthetic lifestyle, which not only refers to art, but in this case more like just naturally doing what you want, either seeking pleasure or avoiding pain, or both. And the second lifestyle is that of the ethical lifestyle. So on this one, the lecturer makes a note of Immanuel Kant's saying that morality is simply rationality itself, or something like that. I'm not sure if it's a direct quote, but it really stuck with me, and that's why I started looking up Immanuel Kant quotes, and I will probably read up more on Kierkegaard and Immanuel Kant. Trying to read more, and I know these names from English class, but I couldn't tell you what the content of their material was, because I don't think I was as deep of a thinker in high school. I mean, I've always thought about myself a lot, but reading comprehension and literature and things like that were not my strong suit, and I have a terrible memory, but it's getting better, I think. So if I can try to remember what my thoughts were on the lecture. Okay, so back to the three lifestyles. We have the aesthetic lifestyle, the ethical lifestyle, and thirdly and lastly, the religious lifestyle. And so I want to know your guys' thoughts. Which lifestyle do you think you choose more often than not, or identify with? I would say that I identify with the ethical lifestyle, like as in my self-image and what I like to portray. Although sometimes I don't make the most ethical choices, I strive to. And in a very close second would be the aesthetic lifestyle for me. I'm not sure about the religious one. I was raised somewhat in Christianity on my mom's side. It was kind of on and off. And as far as my dad, he's always been a free thinker, and if anything, he just condones maybe Catholicism, because he thinks it's the least, strict or guilt-ridden of the religions, and it's what he grew up with. So I'm trying to remember my thoughts. So Kierkegaard makes it very clear that to choose one of these lifestyles is simply a choice. If you choose the act of choosing the ethical lifestyle is not in itself an ethical choice. It's just a choice. It's just based on your own personal priorities. So I like that the word priorities is used there, because it's a word I've been using a lot. And I think he also makes the point of that some people have to make an effort to be natural, as in they have to make an effort to live the aesthetic lifestyle. And that's where I'm kind of headed right now, because I believe that if you're not enjoying life, you're not gonna want others to enjoy life. And I mean, that's probably common sense, but if you're just living ethically for the sake of others, just living for others, you're not going to get the satisfaction that I believe should be the meaning of life. Although my mind always naturally wants to go back to, I have to do the right thing. And if I sit there and think about my decisions, think about what's best for me, because I do want to do the right thing, I'm going to naturally do the right thing if I'm listening to myself. If I'm really listening to my experience, my emotional cues, just considering the whole picture, I'm going to do the right thing. And I believe that's the same for anyone else. We live so much of our lives unconsciously, and if we can just consciously make decisions, and sometimes take longer to make big decisions, it will pan out. And then even if we make the wrong one, I believe that's still just it panning out. And this also goes back to another lecture I was listening to on I believe it was positivism or fatalism, and then which was a very interesting lecture. I kind of want to touch on that now that I'm thinking about it. That one talks about, it kind of talks in circles, and if you follow me, maybe make a comment, which I was just really entertained by this argument that if somebody is a determinist, okay, I'm using 3 different words for the same thing, but basically saying that things are just going to happen and they're predetermined. So if someone's arguing determinism, it's already been determined that they were going to argue it, and it's already been determined that who they're arguing against is going to vote against it or not believe in it, and simply believing in it does not make it so. So it's just kind of an interesting idea to wrap your head around, or my head around. And so I believe, to relate it to the Kierkegaard lecture and to his existential dialectic, I do believe we're all living the 3 lifestyles at any given moment. Religious, that could, if you put another word in there, something like following a code that comes from outside of your own morals, or is in line with your morals, but still is more of a code, more of something that's explicitly just being a rule abider, I guess, if you want to put it that way. And then I guess that I'm kind of like that sometimes too. But to relate determinism to how I feel about these lifestyles is, we're gonna make that choice given whatever circumstance we're in. I believe that we do our best with whatever we're handed. So sometimes we feel we want to be an aesthetic, and we like to just enjoy the moment, and we just want to indulge in a pleasure, and sometimes we choose something ethical, although it might not bring us pleasure at the time, or we may not even foresee it ever giving us pleasure. But whatever we choose, I believe to an extent, don't want to say it's determined, but just to reiterate what I said, I just think things pan out. Everything is everything. And that's just a very, very general way of saying it. So at the end of the lecturer brings up a great example of Abraham. I believe it's Abraham. I don't know the Bible front to back. But he brings up that this is a classic case in which somebody chooses religion over ethics because God has told Abraham to sacrifice his son. And I think this also hits on the, I saw a quote at a church, and one time, it's this church that they have those like revolving letters or whatever, those signs where they can change the letters. I guess that's what regular signs are, or I guess they're pretty common, but the quote of that day was that morals aren't as important as the reason why, or something to that effect. So what you do is not important as the reason why. And I think that goes into, you know, how religion and ethics can be intertwined, but in the real world application, a lot of times they're not intertwined because people are confusing the doctrine itself with the ethics behind it. So, and I know people will say time and time again that people take the Bible too literally, or they just, you know, interpret it the way that they want to manipulate it. But I'm not saying religion is necessarily bad or evil or unethical, but certainly the application of any of these lifestyles can be a poor one. Someone can do something ethically right, and then, but just to appear ethical, which sometimes I'm guilty of, and I feel that makes me less true to myself when I'm trying to put a facade on being a good person without actually feeling that I am. And that makes me less aesthetic, which makes life less enjoyable for me. Just really naturally being true to yourself, and when you're not true to yourself, this goes back to me saying, you know, I feel like we do our best. I feel like we're always ourselves. Like, we're ever changing. Some of us more so than others. Some of us less willing to change. Some of us less willing to admit that there are things outside of our own defined characteristics of ourselves. And it's just, things are just going to happen, and it is what it is. But I do want to hear you guys' thoughts, like I said, which lifestyle do you strive to live in, and which do you actually live in, or if it's the same, do you have congruency with your desires and your niche in life, or your role, or are you in conflict somewhere? And I do believe that it does take conflict in order to reconcile these differences, or these contradictions in your mind of what you should be and what you are, and all that sort of stuff. In the lecture, they also talk about, he also speaks on the idea that being purely aesthetic and just living for pleasure gets dull and repetitive, and I think any of them can. That's why we bounce back and forth and just kind of do. I think by bouncing back and forth between what we feel is right for the moment, I think is being aesthetic in itself, because we're just naturally doing what we do as humans, and don't always have to put a label on it, but it was sure helpful. And a very interesting listen. I like to listen to audio lectures and books, because it is like reading, and you can do it while you're driving as long as you're being safe. So with that, guys, drive safe, and don't try this vlogging at home if you're not being safe. And let me know your thoughts, because I'm interested in what you guys have to say, and I want to know if anyone else has read Kierkegaard or Kant, and what else. Oh yeah, so back to the indirect, or I don't know if it's a direct quote from Kant, which was that morality is merely rationality itself. I think that's awesome because I've been trying to be more rational in my decision making, in my life, in my thought processes, and it just really, it made me feel good about that. It made me feel that I'm making sound decisions in my path to try to be more ethical, or genuinely ethical, and not just lie to myself and say that I'm a good person unless I do things that are necessary for my own happiness and in turn that of others. So I believe that's all. I only did 15 minutes and some change, almost 16 minutes now instead of the 20 minutes. So I think that I touched on pretty much all the topics without getting too extensive. Alrighty.